Hi, welcome to my little bookish corner of the internet. My name's Harriet. Today I want to talk through one of my favourite series ever. This has been a long time coming, and it is the Earthsea series. So this is the quartet version. This is the first book that I picked up, and I got it from Waterstones. I think it was in summer last year that I picked this up, and I started reading it in autumn time, finished it in January of this year. So it was a quick read for me. That was all 6 books, not just the 4. I loved it a lot. I still love it. I want to reread it already, which is crazy, I know, but I thought today I would do a little review and overview of the events that happen in the book. I do want to put a very mild spoiler warning in here. I'm not going to be spoiling any major plot points, but I am going to discuss roughly what happens in the books and some of the characters. So I'll just put that in here first if you do decide to watch it, but there will still be some surprises if you do decide to read these books after you've watched this video, so don't worry. Okay, let's get started. So the first book is A Wizard of Earthsea, and as I say, there are 6 main books, but there are also 4 short stories that I will mention at the end. And each story does actually open up with a map of Earthsea. So this was in A Wizard of Earthsea. You can see the different islands. I originally, when I started reading them, was a little bit confused, but the more that you read, the more you understand where the layout of the lands are and where the different islands are and who lives there, why they're different. In the first story, we start by following a young boy called Guin, and he lives on the Isle of Gaunt, which is in Earthsea. And through a couple of different events, Guin finds that he is a magic user, so he can use magic. He finds out by using a spell to call goats to him, and it works. Now, not everyone is capable of using magic in this universe, but there are wizards and then there are witches, and they are separate, so they do use magic in slightly different ways. Okay, so Guin has found out that he has magic, so he decides to visit the mage on the island, who is called Guin. I hope I'm saying his name right. That is how I read it every time, so hopefully it is correct. But yeah, Guin basically stays on the island to teach young people magic and make sure that they use it correctly. And he also has to name people on their name days, so it's kind of a coming of age thing, and you are given your true name, which can be used in magical spells to control you. So the true name should only really be known by yourself, the person who gave it to you, and anyone that you completely trust. Guin is named Ged, and he uses the name Sparrowhawk as a name that other people can call him, so he doesn't give out his username. I hope that made sense. So I will refer to Guin/Sparrowhawk as Ged from now on, because that is his username. And Ged basically gets taken in by the mage Guin to kind of be his apprentice and learn the ways of magic. But Guin has a very unusual way of looking at the world. So he's a very quiet person. He doesn't like to use magic too much because he believes in the balance of the world, which is spoken about a lot in these books. It's very much the good and evil balancing, the dark and the light. And I really liked that. I thought that was a really lovely thing to read about. But Ged isn't like this, so he's a little bit impatient. He's a little bit of a rascal, to be honest. He's still quite young, and he just wants to learn magic and use it as much as he can and as quick as he can. So he goes off to a school on the island of Roke that is for wizards, so he can learn the ways of magic and how to use it. Here at this school he meets multiple different people, but he becomes really close friends with a young magic user called Vetch, who is one of my favourite characters. He's so lovely. He also meets a character called Jasper, who is not so nice. Basically, there's a lot of rivalry between Ged and Jasper. They are both quite strong magic users, so there is a lot of tension between them, and one day that tension comes to a head and Ged makes a mistake with one of the spells that he uses, and he releases something really dark and dangerous. And that is the main plot point of this story, is going to be Ged following that darkness and trying to rectify his mistakes, but unfortunately making some more along the way. Also follows him growing up and realising why Guin was the way he was with magic and how it can be really dangerous and really dark. I think this was a fantastic start to the series. It really drew me in. It was really easy to get through. The characters were all really lovely and felt really real. You get to see Ged grow as a person as well in such a short book, but you really get to see that character development already, which is fantastic. I should note all of these are 5-star reads for me, probably because I'm so in love with the series, but her writing just stays brilliant the whole way through. There are some books that I do prefer over others, but I love them all. So that is the first one. The second book is called The Tombs of Atuan, and this follows a different character. This story is set in a slightly different place in the lands of Earthsea, and it's like a religious temple. We get to follow a young girl called Tehanu as she grows up and is destined to become the High Priestess of the Nameless Ones, which are kind of like the oldest magical force in the Earthsea universe. This character is super lonely and we get to see her growth as a person and how that affects her choices and her beliefs. And in Atuan, there are these tombs that are under the ground that only the High Priestess can go into, and there is no light that is allowed to be there because it will shine on the nameless ones, the dark ones. But when she goes in there one day, she can sense something is different, and she finds Ged. This follows Ged when he is a little bit older. He has been a mage for a long time now. His story has continued, and you do get to find out a lot more about what he's been doing in that time. And he is searching for some kind of talisman in the tombs that Tehanu knows is there. And it's about her decision whether to help him or to leave him and keep being the High Priestess. You have to remember that's how she was brought up. So she's been brought up believing all these things for all of her life, but also feeling like she doesn't belong there. So it's really interesting to see how her mind is going through these things and how she's working through it. This book, I would say, is a lot slower paced than the first one, but you get to see more of that amazing character building shine through. The tension between Tehanu and Ged is really interesting to see their relationship and how they communicate with each other throughout the story. And even though it was a lot slower, it's still really strong, and I loved every second of it. And now we come on to the third book, which is my favourite, and that is The Farthest Shore. Now, if you've ever seen the Studio Ghibli film Tales from Earthsea, this, I would say, has the most themes and plot points from that. So even though it's called Tales from Earthsea, it doesn't have anything to do with the book Tales from Earthsea. I'd say it is more to do with The Farthest Shore. That film is really different though. The characters, I'd say, are almost completely different, but I do highly recommend it. I would maybe just watch it as a separate film to the books if you're expecting a book to film adaptation. It's too different to say that it's a good one, but it is a good film in its own right. I would say that the third book is where things start to get really dark, and it's more of a YA to adult novel compared to the first two. Magic is fading from Earthsea and things are starting to get really dark. We get to follow another new character who is a young prince called Eren, and he is sent to get help from the Archmage, who is Ged, or Sparrowhawk. And Ged has to find out why these things are happening. He is one of the strongest mages in Earthsea, so that's why they come to him. This story is very intense. There is a lot of travelling, which I really loved. And there's also parts of the story where you get to see this darkness creeping into the characters, so into Eren and into Ged, which I thought was interesting to see that side of them. You also get to see more dragons in this. We do see them in the first book, but they are a little bit more prominent in the third one, and that was really cool. You do get to find out more background on them as the series goes on, but not quite in this one. So there's still a lot of mystery surrounding it, which is awesome. I like to be kept on my toes when I'm reading a book. I don't like all of the information given to me at once, so I really appreciated that. This story does deal with the land of the dead as well, which does relate to the first book slightly, but I don't want to say too much because I might ruin it for you. But that whole section of this book is incredible. I really love the way it was written. The descriptions were amazing, and you really get to feel the pain that Ged and Eren go through throughout this whole story. And the antagonist is also very cool. I would say he's one of the most relatably evil characters I've ever read about. He is scared of certain things that I think we are all scared about. Again, I don't want to say too much. But yeah, it was nice to be able to kind of relate to an antagonist, but also see that he is incredibly evil and what he's doing is wrong. Also at the end of the book, there is a section that made me feel like my heart was going to split in two. It was, I don't want to say painful to read, but it made my heart ache for one of the characters. So these books are surprisingly emotional. That's why I think as they go on, they get sadder and they get darker. And I don't really know if younger children would understand really what's going on. So I'd say they do get more adult as they go through. The fourth book was released a little bit after the original trilogy, and it was originally seen as the last book of Earthsea, but then Ursula wrote the next two and the short stories also. You can kind of feel that this is a slightly different book. It is a very quiet novel. It's a lot darker. There are some things in here that I would say be careful of. There's some trigger warnings to note, so look into that before you read this one. And we get to see a lot of the old characters that we know and love. So Tehanu comes back, we get to see Ojian, and Tehanu is looking after a young girl called Theru. Theru has been burned and permanently scarred from her childhood, so Tehanu takes her in and tries to look after her, but there are really evil forces at work. There is another wicked mage involved who essentially wants to carry on what was happening in the third book. There is some extremely difficult to read things in this novel towards the end. I really would look into this if you do find yourself affected by any kind of violence, domestic abuse, yeah, it was kind of hard to read, but it didn't feel unnecessary. It felt like a good way to show how the characters would deal with that situation and how terrible the antagonist in this story is. Yeah, with some books, sometimes there's stuff in there that's just too dark for me. This felt like it belonged in the story, but I would not want to read this to your children. It was a quiet book, a slow burner, but the conclusion was fantastic and I really loved it. It was a good way to round off the quartet. Speaking of which, so this is the one that I got from Waterstones in the summer, and then I got another edition because I liked the way it looked. This was off Facebook Marketplace, part of like a big book bundle that I got. So I do have 2 editions of this because I just love them so much. They're some of the best books that I've ever read, so I would like to collect more Earthsea things. I have actually been looking for memorabilia and there's not that much, like mugs and things like that, but it doesn't seem to be a big thing, especially compared to obviously larger fantasy series. That's kind of why I wanted to make this video, so I can get people more involved in it, and maybe if you haven't read it but you've heard about it or you've never heard about it before, this might make you pick up even just the first book and see if you like it. Because I think it deserves so much more credit than what it gets. I love it so much. There are only a couple of reviews on YouTube that I've seen as well, so hopefully this helps you a little bit to decide if you do want to read them. Okay, the 5th book is another kind of add-on one. So this came out a little bit later. It's called Tales from Earthsea. It's kind of like an anthology set in the world of Earthsea. Now the word anthology might put people off and think they don't have to read it, but it is so important that you read this book. It links everything together from the 4th book into the 6th book. There's a lot of magic in here. It was obviously super easy to read because you get to follow multiple different characters, so you're not stuck in one storyline. It moves about all the time. And yeah, there's not too much I can say about that because there are so many stories in there. I don't want to give too much away, but definitely read it if you want to read the 6th one, because it will clear up some things that may not be answered if you just read the 6th. So it is part of the series. You do need to read it to continue on in the story. And then the 6th book, and technically the last, is The Other Wind. This one gave me a little bit more of the Tehanu vibes, so it was a lot quieter. There were some dark themes in there, but it's not as dark as Tehanu was. We are following another new character called Alder, and he is haunted by dreams of his dead wife. So we do get to revisit the Land of the Dead, which is one of my favourite places in Earthsea. I think it's just written so well. Obviously this is very dark still, but there aren't as many violent scenes in it as Tehanu. It is quite a sad book though. There were some really sad parts to this. There's a lot of heartache and death and lots of destruction as well. But there are also strong themes of family and friendship involved, which was really lovely to read. In this story we do get to revisit all of our favourite characters. So Ged is back, we've got Tenar, Teru, and we do also have Eren, so they are all back together now and they have to try and figure out what is going on with the world because the dead are reaching out to the living. Now Ged has changed quite a lot from the first book. Again, I won't say too much because that definitely will spoil what happens in the previous books, but he is not the same person as what he used to be, but he can help everyone to figure out what's going on because he has previously visited the Land of the Dead with Eren. There is a lot of pain and sorrow surrounding Ged. I found it really interesting to read about how he's trying to battle with his emotions as well as battle with what's happening in the world of Earthsea. And he also has to protect the people that he loves too. It was hard to read, but it was also very interesting to read. And you really get to see his character development shine through in this one. Originally, I did think this was the last book, like the last piece of Earthsea. And then I found the 4 short stories. Without reading the 4 short stories, I would say this is a perfect conclusion to the Earthsea series. I thought it was done really well. Everything was wrapped up, but it wasn't rushed, it wasn't hurried. You get to learn a lot more about the lore of Earthsea and also dragons and some of the background of the characters as well. Yeah, this was a really good one and a great way to end the series. Unless you want to read the 4 short stories, which I really recommend. I believe that you can read them all for free online. Obviously, if you want to support the series a little bit more, there is this edition here, which is a huge hardback. It's beautiful, it's illustrated, all the pages are really lovely, so you can see it looks really nice. And this does contain your 6 stories, and then it contains the 4 short stories too. 3 of the 4 short stories give you a little bit more background into the lore of Earthsea if you're interested in that, and also some of the characters. It's kind of like an extra information thing. The stories aren't too long. In fact, I think they're all under 10 pages. But if you love the way that Ursula writes and you love the world of Earthsea, I really recommend reading them. Short stories are The Rule of Names, The Word of Unbinding, and The Daughter of Odrin. And then the fourth one is called Firelight, and I don't even know how to put into words what I felt about the story. When I finished it, I cried for maybe 10 minutes. Yeah, it was a really emotional read. If you want the perfect conclusion to this series, I really recommend reading Firelight. As I say, I think it's online for free, but if not, you should definitely pick up this edition, the hardback, because it's beautiful. I think it was about £25. It's usually on sale somewhere, but for some reason it doesn't come with a dust cover, which I thought was really weird. But yeah, that's Earthsea. I was so excited to film this video and just talk about it for a really long time. I have never fallen this hard in love with a series before. I am currently reading Lord of the Rings, and I really like that. Like, if I hadn't read Earthsea, that probably would be in my favourites, but Earthsea just knocks it out the park. Yeah, I hope this has answered some of your questions about Earthsea, maybe made you think about reading it, or if you have read it before, I hope this was a nice roundup and that you agree with some of my points. If you have anything that you want to talk about Earthsea, I would love to speak to you. So comment down below, or you can find me on my Instagram, and let me know down below what your favourite books are. It doesn't have to be a series, it can be a standalone. If you love it, I want to hear about it. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a really lovely day. It's nice and sunny here, which makes a change for the UK. And I will see you in my next video. Bye!